to already get started? Yeah? All right. So just maybe before we get started with the session, I'm Nick Dickinson from IRC, and we coordinated this sub-theme on monitoring and the use of evidence, and we've had a number of different sessions that have taken place already. I think there's been some great content. On Monday, we had a session about country-led monitoring. So really, how do countries and governments start to take leadership in establishing monitoring systems at scale and guiding programs and creating an enabling environment for services. And I think this session is going to be a great follow-up to that, because it's really about using data to create markets, products, and services. And we've also had sessions on how to address and measure inequalities. So that was yesterday. And tomorrow we'll have sessions on measuring hygiene behavior change in the morning, as well as, sorry, I should probably get my cheat sheet, because we have 2 other sessions then in the afternoon. And I should know this all by heart, yes. So one on monitoring CLTS, but also post-ODF monitoring, which should be interesting because it's about sustaining those changes, which is sometimes forgotten in national systems. And also at the end at 3 tomorrow, this should be very interesting actually, is how, for example, when you have, let's say, the national monitoring system, data is coming in, how do you validate that, and how do you continue to learn quickly so that we can actually scale and reach the SDGs by 2030? That's a huge challenge. You look at a country like India, where there's been a huge political impetus. It's also a challenge to ensure that the quality of the reports coming in is still of a high level when it's going at that speed and at that scale. So how do you catalyze rapid, relevant, and kind of timely learning processes that lead to actionable guidance? So that's what the theme will be covering. I'm really excited for this session. So without any further ado, who do I pass it to? So, well, I'll let you introduce.
This mic seems very loud for this large room, I suppose. Right, I'm Neil McLeod. I'm your chair for the first part of the session and hopefully just the very end. Do you all know why you're here? I'm interested to know. Right, well, if you think you're here to talk about mobile systems and the use of mobile systems to improve the way that we monitor what goes on in the water and sanitation, or particularly the sanitation sector, and to share your experiences of how you use mobile data and apps and all those things, then you're in the right place. The way this session is going to take place is that we're going to have 2 presenters, and then Belinda's going to facilitate what is it called, a panel discussion. And obviously there'll be time for them to engage each other and then for you to engage with the panel. This particular thing of using data, smart data in the water and sanitation sector is, to my experience, something very new, but something that has huge potential. Some of it we've used in Durban, where I come from, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but there's so much more to do and so many opportunities. And I guess it's one thing to get the platform right and to get the mobile side right, but the other thing is to get the actual microchips, whatever it is we're going to use to do the detection right. And then when we can marry the 2 together, then we have a whole new paradigm. So, without further ado, let's move to the speakers. The first one, not surprisingly, comes from the GSMA. I often used to wonder what GSMA stood for, but the French always have this horrible habit of swapping letters around to confuse English speakers. So I gather you're the representative body for mobile telephone operators. That's what I know you as. Why it's GS, and I don't understand. But anyway, the MA part I get. The GS, are you going to explain that? Ah, right. So Fergus is the Senior Marketing Engagement Manager for M4D Utilities at the GSMA. I see your whole career has been in mobile telephony from what I read of your CV. So he is a mobile telephony guru who hopefully will enlighten us on what the state of play is in the market. And then after that, we'll have a second speaker. So come and tell us what you know.
I just want to check if this thing works. Where is forward? Oh, where does it work? Oh, this one? All right. All right. Good afternoon. It's very difficult to keep up the momentum after lunch, right? I mean, people started still having their last bites, maybe dessert, taking up coffee, so it's quite difficult to take your attention. Don't fall asleep. We guarantee that this would be an interesting session for all of us. Can you guys hear me okay? Loud and clear? All right, I just wanted to make sure that you are not sleeping. All right, so my name is Ferdos Motakin, and I'm representing GSMA here. The right question is, what is GSMA? How many of you knows about GSMA? Only like a handful, right? Great, at least a couple of. So GSMA is a trade association of mobile operators globally. We represent over 800 mobile operators spanning around 200 countries in the world. And we enable connecting 7.5 billion people and other devices globally. And essentially, our aim is to ensure that mobiles are used for both urban segments as well as in developing segments to enable uplifting human possibilities. And one of the platforms that I represent or I work in, it's called Mobile for Development. And essentially what this Mobile for Development does is we want to identify evidences and possibilities on how mobile can use as a tool to uplift human possibilities. Areas that we work at, like financial inclusion, healthcare, agriculture, value chain creation, ecosystem development for entrepreneurs, and most importantly, utilities. And once we say utilities, it's actually energy, water, and sanitation access. So we would be more talking about the utilities today, especially on the sanitation value chain and how mobile can play a role. So the Mobile for Development Utilities as a program has a mission to unlock commercial sustainable business models that leverage mobile to deliver affordable and improved energy, water, and sanitation access, especially in underserved communities. And this particular program is funded by UK government, DFID, and their other program, Off-Grid Energy Program. Now, this program has been there since 2013, so it's been operating for the last almost like 5.5 years. Initially, when we started the program, it was mainly focused on energy access, so off-grid energy access. But then we introduced water access and sanitation access. So we wanted to understand how mobile as a technology can be used to enable the off-grid population of getting access of energy, water, and sanitation. We do agree that sanitation is something that recently added to our overall portfolio, but we really want to increase our engagement into the sanitation sectors, and that's the reason why we're here. This is the first time GSMA is participating into this sort of events, especially on sanitation. So we really wanted to understand how we can leverage each other's possibility to increase the access of sanitation for underserved. So how this program works mainly looks into three things. One is we provide market insights and disseminate knowledge associated to these sectors. We also provide business development and market engagement across Asia and Africa. And we also have Innovation Fund, or Innovation Challenge Fund. So far, and this is one of the components that has been instrumental in the overall mobile-enabled utility access over the last 5 years. So far, we dispersed about £9.4 million in Innovation Fund in the last 5 years. We provided grants to 53 various entrepreneurs, startups, and organizations who wants to try mobile as an enabler to increase the accessibility of water, sanitation, and energy. Now, frankly, as I mentioned, that our footprint in in sanitation access is pretty limited. So far, we have only 6 grants have been provided to sanitation sectors. But I think the number is not really what speaks about it. Rather, what are the insight that we're pulling from these 6 grants and how those are actually looking at mobile as a component to enable the accessibility of sanitation. That's exactly where we wanted to really more focus on. So this is just a portfolio of the grants that we have provided. It's mainly looking over all the various different components, energy, water, and sanitation. Now, one thing I wanted to mention here is some of the segment that energy access was targeted to, which was off-graded, we believe that a lot of those off-grid energy access thing and market insight that we pulled would be useful for sanitation access as well, because most cases, the off-grid population, which are not connected with grid energy access, are also most likely having challenge with sanitation access. So how can we leverage the understanding of people's behavior at the off-grid community and utilize those learnings for sanitation access enhancement? So as I mentioned that we have 6 grants provided in sanitation. Out of those, 4 are in current phase, which started in 2018 and is moving till end of 2019. And all the 6 grants are really amazing, and most of them are here in this conference, which is great. I see many of them are here even in the audience and speakers today. We have CBSA, which is the alliance. They're working to build up a unified platform to enable their alliance members, Container-Based Sanitation Alliance members, to sort of use a single sort of platform to build up an unified approach of building efficiencies as well as value chain development. My colleague Corey would be speaking more on that in the next couple of minutes. KCCA, which is also one of our current grant, it's Kampala Capital City Authority. They're also using mobile for creating the accessibility among their value chain members and using mobile payment. We have SANERGY. And SANERGY is using machine-to-machine communication and sensor-based technologies for accessing the real-time information from toilets. Luwat is here. Most of us know about Luwat, so I'm not going to talk about it, but we'll actually have some small case study on them later on. Swada, which is an Indian-based entrepreneur who are building up a platform to connect between entrepreneurs, distributed entrepreneurs, service providers who are delivering sanitation services and products through a e-commerce-based platform and application. It's a very innovative approach. Practical Action, which is also building up sort of a tool connecting the city municipality authorities with citizens to enable sanitation access by mobile applications, enabling various other mobile-based technologies. So in a broader way, there are actually 3 areas where we think mobile can play a role. One is mobile payment, which is obviously one thing that we have seen a huge growth in Africa, as well as some part of Asia. We also think mobile services like voice calls, SMS, applications, those are the channels which can be utilized to communicate among the various different stakeholders within the value chain of sanitation access. And then, of course, machine-to-machine connection in the form of sensors, IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, any form which gives you the real-time data of the status of last-mile components, whether it is a pit, or whether it is a septic tank, whether it is the water line, sanitation lines. There have been a lot of areas where the sensor-based machine-to-machine communication technology can be used. Interestingly, all of our 6 grantees, if you can see that out of the 6, 3 are actually using both mobile money as well as mobile-based communication technologies, voice, SMS, and other platforms. One, of course, is using mostly on the machine-to-machine connectivity technologies, and the other 2 are using mostly on the mobile-based services. So we think the mobile as a tool can be adding value on the overall enhancement of sanitation value chain, and we perhaps haven't explored the entire possibility of it. And we wanted to understand how best we can add more value into it. And we believe that the entire sanitation value chain, mobile can play a role in each of the segment, from containment till the recycling. And we think mobile can play a really key role to enable connectivity across the multi-stakeholder, which would actually enable to get real-time data, as I mentioned earlier. It helps decision-making process for anyone who is into this sector, and also it increases the possibility of collecting accurate data. We talked a lot about data accuracies and data validations. I think this is one of the areas where mobile can play a very vital role. We definitely need to explore what are the various different ways we can do that, which is still sort of in a various learning and development phase. We wanted to take it further up. Now, we wanted to bring up 2 more examples. Of course, I talked about it already, but 2 of our past grantees, they have been now operating mostly on the ground, to some extent commercially. One is Luwat, which was our grant in 2015, and they are using mobile-based or mobile-enabled logistics for waterless toilet, and it is happening in Madagascar. They're working with Airtel Madagascar as their operating partner. They're using mobile voice and data channels as well as mobile payment channels. And through this grant piloting, they developed a mobile app to track waste collection process, collect payments, and this eventually increases the overall efficiency of it. And interestingly, if you look into the impact, 70% of the users of the water toilets are women, which actually talks a lot about the dignity that we talked about yesterday. And of course, you look into the financial aspects of it, the efficiency increased by 15 to 25% of their business operations. So certainly, technology plays a vital role. We need to really deep dive into deeper of it and see how best we can replicate those learnings and ensure that those are replicated in various parts of the world. We know that Luwat is expanding their footprint. Really hope that this actually scales up, this sort of mobile-enabled service value chain. The other example is SANERGY. Well, many of you already know about them. So throughout our grant pilots, they did sensor-based approach for the public toilets, 30 toilets that they installed in Kenya. And through the sensors, they wanted to get a real-time information as well as predictive analysis on when exactly they would need to empty the pits or collect the waste. So essentially, it worked well. It, though, has a lot of various learnings from the ground. It was challenged with some of the indicators, but I'm sure those challenges they have overcome to adjust their overall technology as well as their algorithms. What it shows is sensors, machine-to-machine connectivities are capable of providing a real insight on the ground, which may increase the possibilities of fault rectification quickly, managing your resources on the ground quickly, as well as ensuring the service uptime for the end users. So we believe that this has a huge potential, but still we need to work more on it. More evidence needs to be coming from the ground so that we can tell which are working well, which are working less, and which are not working. I think those process has to be going through. We started it, and we really hope that we'll be able to get more in coming days. Now, what we really want to achieve, from the current 4 grants that we're having on the ground, we wanted to examine and we wanted to understand how mobile payment can be more scaling up, how mobile payment can enable more on increasing the efficiency of the value chain. We wanted to understand how geodata, GIS data, or location data can be utilized for efficient sanitation access. We also wanted to understand how creating a platform to connect the service providers and the service seekers increases the possibilities of sanitation access as well. So these are the expectations, and we believe once we have the learnings from this current 4 grants on the ground, we would be able to share some of the insight, which I'm sure would be quite interesting in coming years. I would love to share those in the next FSM Africa San event. And I think that is all from my side. Thank you.
So you've got to come to FSM6, right? Will be 6, won't it? Yeah. Right. The next, and thank you for sticking to time. It always makes my job easier when you stick to time. For some reason, Professor Russell has got half the time. What do I draw from that? Right. So Corey, I called him doctor yesterday, but I found out this morning, well, now he was a professor, so my apologies for yesterday. But I see you're in landscape architecture and environmental science in Oregon, and of course you're the chair of the Container-Based Sanitation Alliance. I can understand why you're interested in this challenge, because from Durban again, I remember we had these 2 problems. How often do you go to collect from the containers? If you go too often, you get empty ones and it costs you a bomb. And if you go in too infrequently, the jolly things are spilling and you have very unhappy customers. But I'm sure you're going to talk about that. So come and tell us what's really going on.
All right. So first I'm going to start out with a quick sort of introduction to what is container-based sanitation, what the Alliance is, and then how we're using the funding from GSMA to build a platform across the entirety of the Alliance. So container-based sanitation, as some of you may or may not know, is basically, it consists of end-to-end service that collects waste hygienically from waterless toilets built around sealable, removable containers. As you can imagine, this is a very customer-intensive process, right? You have to be interacting with your customers at many different points, and it's a high-touch sort of business. The other thing that this has is that there's a lot of logistics involved, right? So you're not just emptying every few months to years, you're collecting the containers on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And that means that there's a lot of logistics around moving those containers. Now, this is not an insurmountable problem. We do solid waste collection, we do package delivery, so there is precedent for this sort of logistical work. Why would you want container-based sanitation? There's a couple different reasons. We have rapidly urbanizing areas that don't have sewers. They're space limited, so pit latrines and septic tanks are not an appropriate solution in a lot of these areas. Additionally, with high water tables and flooding, pits and septic tanks can become inundated and then spread that waste around the community. That leads to unsafe emptying practices, especially if you can't get exhauster trucks into these areas. And then additionally, if you're trying to put in sewerage into some of these areas, if you have unreliable water access, sewer becomes an inappropriate solution for those areas. And lastly, renters that lack investment for infrastructure or lack of government recognition are often reticent to put in permanent infrastructure because they'll lose that investment. So how does CBS improve fecal sludge management? Well, the first thing that it does is that from the moment of containment, when the user uses the toilet, that waste is in a container that is sealed and then moved in that sealed container all the way to wherever it's treated. So that means that you isolate disease-causing pathogens from the community at large and throughout the transportation process. So as you can imagine, how does this play out as far as customers and a mobile platform? The first is with the customer themselves. You want to be able to bring in new customers. You want to track those customers. You want to get real-time feedback from them. Because you have a container there, if something goes wrong with that toilet, if that toilet fills up, if there's some sort of issue, you want to hear from your customers as quickly as possible. And additionally, like Fergus was saying, there's the issue of mobile payments. This is an area that is really important for sanitation businesses, because if you do not have mobile payments, if you have to do it in sort of classic cash payments, that means you have to have somebody who is going around and collecting those payments. Your efficiencies, your costs are much, much higher. And so being able to capture mobile payments not only makes it safer for the families, it also makes it safer for the collectors, and it makes the whole system run much smoother. Second, you have collection, so tracking and mapping where your collection routes are, especially if you have a sick collector, somebody's out for a day, being able to then go back and know where they're supposed to collect. That knowledge isn't lost. It's being kept and updated constantly. Transportation route optimization. This is especially important in areas that don't have Google Maps, right? So if we're dealing with informal settlements, some of these areas have never even been mapped. And so you can actually collect highly useful data about the communities themselves and the best routes to get through that, and then continue to update that. With treatment, you have a lot of tracking and reporting of waste treatment. And this is really useful for reporting back to governments. How much waste are you collecting? How much are you treating? And then where does that waste go? So you can also use a mobile and an IT platform to track sales, track where it's going after it's been treated, and report that back to the government. So as Fergus was saying, the Container-Based Sanitation Alliance, this is a group of CBS practitioners from around the world that have basically come together to try and gain greater scale by working together. So a lot of these groups have started as very small entrepreneurs, but by working together, they're able to increase their impact across the world. And so these are the 6 groups that are currently in the Container-Based Sanitation Alliance, which is X-Runner in Peru, Soil in Haiti, Clean Team in Ghana, Sanovation and SANERGY in Kenya, and then Luwat in Madagascar. And the primary objectives of the Container-Based Sanitation Alliance are right here. And each one of these is actually addressed by having a unified platform, right? So I'm going to go over a couple of the different things, but for instance, what we're really looking to do here is create a common set of CBS guidelines and standards so that we know that CBS providers are meeting health standards, meeting environmental standards, and being able to track those guidelines in a uniform way for all of the organizations allows us to do that. It also enables scale, because if you have startup companies coming in and doing this, they need to be able to access tools that would cost a lot to build themselves and maintain. And this, being an alliance, allows new users to come in and use this and harness the learned knowledge up to this point as well. So it enables replication of these businesses in a way that previously we wouldn't have been able to do. All right, so a couple of different things specifically with the GMSA funding. Why do we need it, right? So the current solutions, a lot of times people will say, well, you could just cobble something together, and that is what our groups have been doing. They've either been building their own mobile platforms, they've been using different CRM solutions, and a bunch of different sort of options. Unfortunately, when you start to scale that up, it becomes very expensive if you've got multiple pieces of software that you have to scale up. Those multiple pieces of software don't always work together really well. And given the size of the groups that are working on this currently, a lot of those big sort of CRM software solutions are designed for something else. And so it fundamentally doesn't fit as well. Second, user interfaces are not intuitive and not optimized for sanitation services. And this is especially important when you're dealing with your collectors and different folks who are going out into the community and need to use these interfaces. If they don't have a tech background, having really complicated systems can really slow everything down and lead to incorrect data entry. And we also see that this integration problem becomes a huge issue. Data gets lost along the way as it's transferred between systems and leads to inefficiencies. There's also a lack of logistical optimization for collection routes and planning in most of the software that's available currently. And as was noted with the LULOT system, that's really, really important. If you look at shipping companies, if you look at trash collectors, optimizing routes is integrally a part of bringing your costs and increasing your efficiencies. And so you can save a lot of money by being able to optimize your route. Offline functionality is not always available, and this is really essential, right? As you're moving into areas that may or may not have internet connectivity, having systems that can operate in sort of intermittent connectivity is super important. And last, there's limited reporting from what is currently available on standards and KPIs. So being able to report back to governments with clean, clear reporting and statistics is vitally important. All right, so what are we learning? These are some of our initial learnings from this, and this is after about a year of development and working with the different organizations, and we're just about to launch the first user testing. So we're hoping to have the final versions in the next 6 months or so. So building on adapted existing sanitation service software, so we basically went to each of the groups within the CBS Alliance, and they've all been working on this problem for several years, and so there were a lot of different learnings that they had all brought together. And so getting everybody in the same room, talking through where their pain points were, and figuring out the best ways to go forward was our first step. And so as an alliance, that made it much, much easier to start coming up with solutions than having individuals that were disconnected. So functional specifications have to be tailored to specific providers, but they also have to remain integrated to the whole system, right? So we have created a system whereby different users can use different modules that connect to each other, but then it allows for specificity depending on context, which is vitally important to all of the members of the CBSA because each of their business models is slightly different. It's context dependent. And so that makes their solutions much better fit for wherever they're working. And so while we want to bring guidelines and standards and have an integrated model, we also want to build in that flexibility. So then agile development and extensive user testing, this is the next step that we're working on. And it's also going to be important as we go forward to be able to create systems that work across everyone that will be involved in this. Early on in the CBS development process, I was working on a research project in which we had created a digital system. We spent a ton of time user testing it with the collectors themselves. That end was great. At the high levels of the organization, everybody was happy with it, but we didn't spend any time with middle management. And so basically, the middle management interface was not pretty. It was a lot of work. And the whole system basically shut down and everybody went back to using paper-based systems because they were collecting all this data and none of it was being harvested or used for any learning. And so that was sort of one of these situations where you need to think about your system across the entirety of the organization. And lastly, data collected can be used for different stakeholders. So one of the beauties of working as an alliance is that we can aggregate data and start to get learnings at a much greater scale than if we were just looking at a single organization. And so that's one of the things that we're working on. Now, of course, as you start to aggregate data, data privacy is going to be super important. And so we're thinking through how we're going to deal with that and how we make sure that aggregated data can't be used to back identify people. And other than that, I will take it there.
You got me thinking what people should know about me from my sanitation service. But anyway, Belinda Caraguas is now going to facilitate a panel discussion with some people who she will introduce. When I first knew Belinda, she was in WaterAid, and then she became the head of, what was it called? Policy in water aid, and she led the advocacy policy initiative, and then went somewhere else, and then became free, as she says, and now is an independent consultant. So you have a free agent leading a panel. You're going to come and introduce your panel. And then we'll have a discussion after that.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. Okay, hi. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to be joined by a panel of discussants. So I just wanted to introduce them to you. First of all, Mary Roach. He's the Chief Operating Officer at Luwat. You've heard about them. A waterless toilet company based in the UK. And Mary was responsible also for, in the past, for GSMA's M4D Utilities Innovation Fund, supporting organizations leveraging mobile technology to improve access to energy, water, and sanitation. So she also worked on the first pilot of M-COPA's pay-as-you-go product, spent 5 years working with GE Power Generation, and a decade of involvement with Engineers Without Borders. So Mary, could you join us? Okay, joining Mary is Dr. Najib Batiganya Lukoya. Dr. Batiganya is currently the Deputy Director for Water, Sanitation and Environment at the Kampala Capital City Authority, where he leads various initiatives, teams and donor-funded projects in areas of waste management, water, sanitation, environmental pollution, and climate change. So he's a lead expert and a team leader on various multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary teams, both at national and international levels, for projects ranging from aquatic ecosystems, hydrology, climate change, you name it. It seems like he's led it. Okay. And our third panelist is Engineer Peter Njaga. Engineer Njaga is a Director, Technical Services at the Water Services Regulator Board, WASREB, in Kenya. He is also currently the Chairman of the Technical Committee on Regulatory Issues of the Eastern and Southern Africa Water and Sanitation Regulators Association. He's had over 25 years of professional experience as an engineer in design and construction, supervision of water infrastructure, operation management, regulation, and capacity development of water utilities. So thank you for joining us all. All right, so we've been talking, our speakers have been speaking to you, telling you about what they've been doing, trying to see how mobile technology can actually enable better service provision in the sanitation and fecal sludge management sector. Can I just have a raise of hands? Who amongst you have used mobile technology in the audience for sanitation services? Sanitation services. Quite a lot. For water services. A few more. Yes, good. So I wonder whether any of you would like to start off by asking questions from our panelists up here on the stage. Or would like to share your own experiences of actually using mobile technology for improving service provision in the sanitation, fecal sludge management area. Anyone? Oh, yes. Sorry. I was.
Maybe it's just anecdotal, but it's kind of humorous. In the Netherlands, you could, pay by SMS at one point to open a public, toilet in, at the train station. And I was recently in the same area where I had tried and failed to do that when I needed to go to the toilet. And I noticed that system was gone.
Wow, okay.
So I hope, I'm expecting good things here, though.
Right. I have, oh, yes.
Yes, I'm Ebenezer Achuga from Ghana. We are working on a household toilet facility in Ghana, providing household toilets for compound houses, and then they pay by installment for a period of time between 6 months to 24 months. And when we started, we were, asking customers to pay by cash. Then at a point in time, the customer base was becoming wider and wider. So we have to start adopting for mobile money. So in Ghana, we call it Momo, mobile money wallet or something. So this is the approach we are going. We envisage some challenges coming up soon, but I want to hear more from other people who have had that experience, and then some thoughts on how we can be able to move or smoothly transition into mobile money payments from our customers.
Yeah, thank you so much. So in Kampala, we found the use of mobile quite interesting, and that's why we partnered with GSMA. Most importantly for us is we've been working on different solutions to see how we can serve the urban poor. What is interesting is most of these people actually have a mobile phone. So we found that very interesting. And they do not have access to improved sanitation. So one of the things that we thought about was how do we link the mobile phone, which everyone uses, to improving sanitation. And this is not limited to fecal sludge. We are also looking at solid waste and also reducing nuisances, public health nuisances in the city. So in this partnership, for us, that's why we came up with the idea of the mobile phone. One, to look at how can people access a service, first of all. Two, how can the service providers also access business from these areas? And the third one was how, as a regulator, as the city authority, be able to, first of all, interface with the public, with the citizens, but also track the service provision in these areas. So that has been our focus with the mobile. I don't know how much you need to know, but probably I can dive into what we've been doing there. So, So one of the solutions that we've been working on is an application that has an interface of the client, so from the demand side, an interface of the regulator, so the KCCA side, and an interface of the service provider, so the supply side. So from the regulation side, we are looking at tracking, basically. Where do you pick the waste? It's a GIS-based tracking system. And where do you dump it? And we've integrated it into the standard operation procedures for the pit emptying services. And then from the service provider side, they are able to access business from our call center services because we have a toll-free call center. So when all clients call to KCCA on a toll-free line, we are able to link these businesses to the different mobile private operators using that system. And then from the service, from the demand side, so the client, they have different options. One, to find how to get a service provider. Two, they can also be able to instantly, once they get the service provider, be able to pay or to make a transaction using that mobile money services. Of course, the challenge has been from the service provider side, from the supply side, being suspicious on why the city is interested in their private business. Primarily for us, it was basically to catalyze service and making sure we track that service, specifically for the urban poor. Because if we put up incentives, we cannot tell where they are doing their business unless if we are able to track that. So that was at the rationale for the mobile tracking. But for them, they thought, okay, they are going to track my money, they are going to track where I go, where I do my business, my cash flows, and then they will give me more licenses, more taxes, more that kind of thing. So it has been a learning curve, and we are still learning on how to do it. But it has been a great partnership. With support from GSMA, we've been able to dive into this and experiment it, and it is working well. Thank you.
Peter, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Peter Njaga from Kenya, working with the National Water Regulator for Water Services. The National Water Regulator for Kenya Services mandate is to issue license to utilities that are in water service provision, also to set standards in water service delivery, and also to ensure consumer protection, and also to ensure that utilities run in a very sustainable way. Kenya, as a few of you may recall here, actually pioneered in mobile money globally through the M-Pesa. And initially, when the concept came, there were a lot of fears. How could you get your money through these gadgets here, while people are used to keeping it under the pillow during the night? Then you'd see it every morning. If you made a payment through mobile, how would you sure that it's received the other end? So people thought that this is the con game now of the century. But nonetheless, it worked very fast. And as regulators, we try to see how can we embrace this mobile technology to try and bring in more of efficiency in water service provision. So the story I'm going to share with you is real, and I'll try to recall a little bit of statistics. So we are making use of these technologies in basically like 4 areas. One of them is in complaint handling. We've developed as a regulator a system called the Emergency Voice, whereby if you have issues with water service provision or you see anything, you can always put in that information through the phone, and then you'll get a response. And because as regulator, we oversee the performance of water utilities, the utility will respond to you that we shall fix your problem within a given time period, depending on their service charter. And then if they don't do it, the problem or the complaint is escalated to the regulator for action. That has worked very well, and it has brought efficiency in water service provision. Of course, one of the things that came clearly through this mobile IT, that one of the area where everybody was complaining about was like being overbilled or late bills and the likes. And so through a consolidation of this problem, the regulator is able to take action. That was very difficult before this technology came in. The other area that's very practical, because I've said the regulator's role is to ensure that utilities are sustainable. Because unless they are financially sustainable, then it's a challenge if it comes to giving services of whatever nature. Before the advent of mobile technology, the collection efficiency of most utilities in Kenya was below 50%. Because they just have to look for you in the market, or you'd have to walk somewhere and collect money. So they were hardly making enough money to be able to even meet their running cost. But what we did as utility, as a regulator, we could not micromanage them. So we set targets and said that utilities minimum collection in terms of revenue must not be less than 90%. And so we left them to look at what innovation around. And most of them ran to the mobile money. And when they established this, the collection efficiency of all utilities in Kenya now is going towards 95%. So it's no longer now a challenge. And the annual collection of water utilities is over $200 million per year, and 90% of that is collected through mobile mobile money. So you can see the impact. It's only a small percentage, maybe in the remote areas where there's no network, that was paid. So that's one of the greater revolution in that utilities are becoming more and more financially sustainable. The other area where mobile collection has this technology has been of use is in the question of service delivery. There are those remote areas in the rural areas. We have put in some mobile dispensers, some water dispensers, and these dispensers, you get your water through some token, but you have to recharge. How do you recharge? You recharge that through your phone. If you check your phone, you can only check through your phone, and the phone tells you, oh, you have withdrawn so much, and so much is remaining. And it has become very convenient because water is basically cheap. So if you put like $1 in Kenya, you can be able to get like close to 100 liters. That has become a very convenient thing, again, courtesy of mobile IT. The other area has also been in the area of data collection. You want to know how much water you are producing, and by using use of mobile IT, especially in the rural area, to be able to dispense water, that information is actually available real time. Now, we collect data in the sector because without information, without data, then it's difficult to be able to design proper intervention. And as a regulator, we have an information system we call WARIS, Water Information Regulatory Information System, that collects data on so many parameters. And to enable that data is also linked up to the mobile technology, and that has become the basis under which we produce every year a report that shows the performance of Kenyan water utility. And through that report, utilities are able to assess how they have performed and then be able to make evidence-based decision. It's able also to promote competition among utilities, again, courtesy of mobile IT. Sanitation, I will not say much because as you know, and probably that's why we met here, sanitation is now becoming a priority now. I think initially we concentrated too much on water and we left sanitation. The sanitation coverage in Kenya is still very low, but we really need to bring it up. And if it has worked in water, then I believe it can also work in sanitation. If you look at sanitation, you split the word, there is the C-word and the non-C-word. I think we have the challenge in the non-C-word sanitation. But with the C-word sanitation, we are already making use of the technology to correct payments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I like the way he ended. So maybe you have some experience because what I'm thinking is that, you see, for water, it's quite easier when you talk of default and how you're going to get people to pay. Because for us, anyway, my name is Bonsu. I'm from Kumasi in Ghana. Sorry. Yes, and what we are looking to do in recent times is that we have service providers who are collecting waste, solid waste, and also even liquid waste or toilets from people, be it septic or whatever it is. But the people are paying directly to the providers. Now, we have attempted to get the providers to start mobile collection in terms of revenue because we think that it's going to boost their revenue streams. But they are reluctant because now you need to go to the person for the payment. And sometimes you need to chase them for the payment. When they are not paying, it becomes a challenge because it's unlike water, which is easier because you can cut the service to that particular person. For solid waste, it has other effect on people who live nearby if you leave the waste unattended to. And even for liquid waste, it's also a challenge because it's a public good and you still need to provide a service. So, if we go into the beneficiaries to collect the revenue, it's difficult in terms of default. Talking about mobile payments, whereby the service beneficiary is supposed to initiate the payment by him or herself. How are we going to deal with default when people are not paying? Have you had encounters with such challenges, and how did you go about it? Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, excuse my voice. I was ill before this conference, and I've lost my voice since. So I think, first of all, to address your point, I think it is important to note the difference between Kenya, Uganda, East Africa in general in terms of the mobile, like how the mobile ecosystem is and where you're operating in Ghana and other places. To give you an example, back in 2010, I think I was paying for taxi rides in Kenya using mobile money. at, for $2 or $3 at a time. I'm not sure if I could do that in Accra or Kumasi today. So I think to get to your point, I think a lot of it is really around service design and how you design the service. From where I currently work with Luwat as a service provider, we've had to kind of shift how we think about collecting payments. So first going from a postpaid service to a prepaid service. So that in and of itself has helped a lot in terms of helping kind of change the mentality of our customers to think about actually how can they prepay the service, ideally sometimes even months in advance. And that has really been helpful for two reasons. One is that it has allowed our customers to invest in the service when they have money, right? So usually during harvest seasons or other times, or also in particular when there are, when school fees are not due. And then the second thing is that it has allowed them to think about kind of pre-financing really the service, right? So they have, in general, our customers appreciate our service. I'm sure your customers appreciate the service that you deliver. But when it comes to deciding, the day of whether or not they need to pay for your service or potentially put food on the table, of course they're going to put food on the table first. So by adopting a prepaid service, we've actually enabled our customers in some ways to save for that service by paying for it in advance. The second thing that we've done, which has been quite successful, has actually been providing kind of a two-tier pricing system and providing a pretty significant discount to our customers to have them pay by mobile money, right? So as you know, it costs a service provider in both people time to actually go out and collect the payment, but also there is a transparency cost in the payment, right? Even tracing and managing actual cash collections is a challenge. So what we've decided to do is actually pass on some of the savings that we have by using mobile payments to our customers to allow them to kind of see the upfront benefit. The last thing that I think is really important is that one of the most useful messages that we've been able to pass on to our customers around mobile payments is actually indicating how they could be either saving time or money by using mobile money for other services. So in the context of Madagascar, the Jirama is both the water utility and the electricity utility. And anyone who's ever had to go and pay a Jirama bill usually has to go and wait in line for several hours. Luckily, Jirama also accepts mobile payments. And so by having them adopt mobile payments to pay their water and electricity bill, it has actually helped kind of speed up their adoption for payment for services for our service, which is a sanitation service. I don't know if you've got other things to add.
Just to add on something small, I mean, I think for me, she has said it all, but I can only add the convenience of a customer, of a client to actually make a transaction and also get a service. But the service providers must demonstrate the efficiency of providing that service and probably the incentive she has just mentioned. Of course, for me at a city level, we've already rolled out this in other service areas. People can pay their licenses, they can pay their permits, ground rent, all that, using water and all that. But in these vulnerable hotspot areas like sanitation, for example, which my colleague also mentioned, we need to do a little bit more for people to actually appreciate that they can also be able to improve in those areas using the mobile money. So just to make it convenient for them to be able to improve their sanitation.
Let me add something for my colleague in Ghana. The question of default. I think some of these new technologies, when they come, is a matter of change, and the change takes time. And what we have seen in the Kenyan case is that there is need for, that change of mentality. I think my colleague has just mentioned it. Most of emptying of the pits is done by private operators in Kenya, and most of them are reluctant in receiving cash. Yeah, when you say you want to pay them, they'll say no, they don't want cash. you have to pay through mobile phone. Equally, most of the customers are also reluctant now in making their payments in cash. Yeah, they also want to make mobile. So there is still some change that is required on both ends for us to be able to embrace these. To embrace the new technology. I mean, it's not just one way. It is good. It is both ways. Even most outlets in Nairobi now, you find they very comfortable with they don't want cash. They just want to be paid through mobile IT. So there's some work to be done on both sides, and it takes time, and it's just a matter of time if you insist on in Ghana, and people will get used to it. I mean, there's nothing health in defaulting. Why are you getting the service and you don't want to pay? What kind of person are you? See? I mean, that is the question, really. Thank you.
So we've been talking a lot about the user interface and mobile payment, but I'd like to just remind ourselves that, okay, what we're looking here is about mobile technology and improvements in service delivery, so that we in the continent can actually implement the commitments of the NGOA commitments. And I just wanted to go back to one of the commitment number 7, which is to eliminate untreated waste. And I just wanted to ask our panelists, can IT tools also be used for tracking the amount of waste treated and to make sure that waste is actually treated?
Okay, so the answer is yes. Yeah, and I could tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Luwat in Madagascar. But basically, we actually weigh each of the barrels of waste that comes to our treatment plant or is deposited also at one of the treatment plants operated by the city. So we have kind of full line visibility from the household to the point of treatment in terms of what waste is actually being brought to our treatment centers. And then the second point is also that we kind of through other IT tools are also tracking kind of the overall efficiency of our waste treatment centers. So we operate a combined pasteurization and AD plant in Madagascar, and we also kind of track the operational efficiency of that plant.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, so the solution we've developed for Kampala, for the pit emptiers, also captures the volume. So when the pit emptier goes to the customer's point, they log in and we will capture that information there. But at the dumping point at the National and Storage Corporation plant, they also have to log in, and for us in the system it shows, okay, picked from there, dumped here. In one of at the interface for the service provider, one of the information they provide is the volume. Of course, it's not so accurate, but at least they need to capture the volume. And this is quite easy for the vacuum tankers, especially if it is full, if it is half full, because they are defined. So one of that information is captured, and we are able to know, for example, now we can track the volume increases, decreases, using that tracking system. Yeah.
So I saw some hands. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Ronnie. I'm with WaterAid. I think if we reflect on the program, one of the running themes is around leaving no one behind. And the question that I have for the panel is, how do we make sure that the most needy people who cannot even afford a mobile phone have access to water, given the technologies that we are pushing forward to?
Okay, so I'll start a bit.
Sorry, sanitation facilities, not water. Thank you.
Okay. I will tell you what's happening in Kampala specifically, my city. So I know we talk about the affordability, and for me, it's a very controversial topic many times. I'll give you an example from, we did a survey for solid waste, and the politicians kept saying, okay, these people in informal settlements cannot afford to pay. But actually what happens is they collect a bit of garbage in the morning, give it to some small boy or wherever, and they take it to wherever they want to drop it. And then they pay probably 100 shillings or 200 Uganda shillings, a few dollar cents. When you accumulate that, it is actually much more than the structured official fees per month for that area. So that's why I'm saying the ability and the affordability is also a very controversial topic. For me, from a city perspective, I think we need to distinguish between the affordability and the willingness, and what kind of subsidization we can give for such groups of people. Because if you say you are going to give for free completely, then it becomes a big challenge to sustain such programs. So I think the win-win situation is to organize such communities to be able to have collective responsibility at a small local level. Those of you who attended some of the sessions in Kampala, for example, we initiated collective emptying services. So for example, we make a campaign in a certain area, and we know we are going to mobilize service providers in this area. And in terms of economies of scale, when a service provider comes and you are going to do massive emptying, you have you are able to contribute little amount, each of you, and you do the emptying. Even if it is subsidized, at least there is some economies of scale at that level. So we need to be innovative. Instead of pushing, they can't afford, we have to have some balance. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to add a comment specifically to your point. I think we need to distinguish between whether or not the users, the households, need telephones, mobile phones, or whether the service providers are using IT infrastructure to support their service delivery. In some cases, yes, the users will be able to have phones. In other cases, and including some of our clients, they may have a phone, but they may only receive phone calls. They may not even know how to SMS. So in those cases, we actually have them work through kind of the network of kiosk owners already in the communities to come and do the payments, because those kiosk owners are generally more adapted to make those payments. So that's one way. I think the other thing to note is that kind of taking on and building mobile systems in general is not something that is cheap or easy. And I think for those reasons, and kind of across the three examples, you'll see how we're trying to basically share costs across multiple organizations. In the specific case of the pilot that we're doing with the CBSA, we are going to be piloting that solution from now until August. We will have more results available in August. We are also hoping to make the system available to other service providers. That includes both CBS service providers, but potentially other household service providers, because we all recognize that the ongoing maintenance cost of IT systems is not something to be laughed at, and needs to be considered in the long term. So this is kind of some of the things that we're thinking about. But I'm sure that both in the case for the water utilities in Kenya and also with KCCA, this is something you're doing as well.
Thank you. Yeah, this is to follow up with Dr. Najib. You were talking about, you said change is difficult, which I think all of us can agree with. And specifically wanted to ask you, I know when we were trying to change to even very simple customer interface of payments, we spent tons of time teaching them and constantly go back to teach them and train them again and again. And so I wanted to ask both from the pit emptiers, so the private entrepreneurs, and even from the government regulator side, a little bit about that story of how much time did that take? Where is it now? Are people using it? Are they forgetting about it?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So for the pit emptiers, we started a lot with the sensitization. Of course, for the informal, remember some of these are predominantly informal. So you have to do a lot of work and with a lot of suspicion from either side. So what we did was to really start from the business coaching, business development point of view. So the business benefits out of using a phone. Look, we tell them, look, all these clients of yours have a mobile phone, and they are not going to look for you at a treatment plant where you park. Someone is in the office. Besides the informal settlements, there are also people working in the office. The septic tank is full. They are not going to look for you, but they can easily access a service using the phone. So the business development part of it and the branding, so we started from there. But also some small incentives, well, maybe not so small. We offered actually the mobile phone itself. So, but with commitments, with so many hidden, hope they are not here, hidden conditions behind. So the mobile phone is really nice. Start by calling your wife and stuff. So eventually, in the first round, we actually found that maybe 10% or 20% of the phones were given to girlfriends, wives, and so they are not actually being used for the business. But that shows you how difficult it is. But we persisted. We persisted. Right now, it's about 60% uptake from almost, well, 2 or 3%. So, and we are moving steadily. So it's continuous engagement, but you also bring in the complementary services. You bring in business coaches, you bring in bankers, you bring in mobile companies. We are working a lot in Uganda with MTN, for example. And when these guys come, they also come along with different products besides the mobile money, and they get excited. So the uptake increases. But to do that as government, many government institutions do not have that luxury and time to do that. So you need to be patient, persistent, and strategic. But also from the service, from the demand side, so from the communities, we have another session talking about sanitation marketing later on this afternoon. You have to do a lot of sensitization, but also marketing. So sanitation nowadays, we have to change from the conventional approaches of awareness, workshops and stuff like that, to real branding and marketing. And that's what we put into these people. And we see, so incentives, in summary, you have to incentivize for the private operators. You have to show them business. You have to show them the benefits in terms of growth. And you have to show them opportunities in working with the mobile phone.
Yep. Hello, Michael Richmann from ERWAG, Switzerland. I have one question. Do you have any experience with sensors connected directly over like mobile connections, so you can have like service on call basically?
So we have some, but from the UK context. So Luwatt operates also in the UK, and we provide basically waterless flush toilets for events where there's usually high usage, and to be able to understand when to service them, our toilets are connected to sensors, specifically sensors that allow us to understand how many users have gone through the toilets, which we use as a proxy for when we have to service them. And sensors can be fantastic. They are quite expensive in general, is the one thing I would add. So it really depends on the context. The other thing is that it also really depends on how reliable the signal is. So for example, we have found that in high-use music festivals, there is often a lack of mobile signal altogether because the signal is jammed. So in those cases, we've had to kind of use private Wi-Fi networks that are often set up at the events as well. So that's just one thing to note. I don't know, Fergus, if you want to talk at all about other experience from sensors, but I think, yeah, in general, sensors are amazing, but they need to be adapted to the use case.
Yeah, just to add, so I was talking about SANERGY in Kenya, and they've been working on these sensor-based things. We also have one water-based grants in Rwanda where we use sensors on the boreholes and the tube wells. So sensors are amazing, as Mary was mentioning. I think that there was a huge evolution happened over sensing technologies, IoTs and machine-to-machine over the years. And if you look into the technology context, the IoT and 5G, which actually would bring up more modernization on the access network side, which will enable more on the machine-to-machine connectivity. But there are less examples available so far of our knowledge of using sensors for sanitations. There have been multiple cases we have observed on water-based things, not in sanitation-based, but we believe that there's a lot of opportunity we can look into this sector, especially leveraging the sensor-based technologies for sanitation accessibilities as well.
Yeah, for us, very quickly to add on, we are looking at them as, of course, they have been at research scale, so we are working on a program to test them as indicators for scheduling emptying, but we've not started yet. It has really been on research scale.
So I think one thing that is related but is not a sensor is really around fleet management trackers. So I think particularly when we're looking at exhaustion trucks and things, getting some relatively cheap fleet tracking GPS trackers on trucks is a really great way to understand how, where, first of all, where the trucks are going, how often are they making trips back to wherever the treatment site is. And you'll be able to kind of do a lot of measurement with a much kind of cheaper GPS module.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Unfortunately, I've just been told that we now need to close down the conversation. So thank you to the panelists, to Mary, Peter, and Najib. And thank you all to everybody who asked questions. And I hope this session has actually increased and strengthened your interest in how technology in the sanitation and fecal sludge management sector can actually make service delivery better and help governments actually implement their commitments. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hand you over now to Neil.
I was just... Is this one working? Okay, I'll use this one. Just interesting. I've learned from hard experience that the best way to improve service delivery is through community-based regulation. So if your customers know what's going on, then they hold you to account better than any regulator or any government body. They're the ones that can really put the pressure on you. And I sense that this platform that we're talking about is a way to improve that. Whether it's using your mobile phone to phone an overflowing sewer and send the picture in with the GPS coordinates saying, your sewer is blocked, or whatever, or here's a guy dumping in the river. We've started to see that in Durban as a major support. And your comment about vehicle tracking, that is such a powerful tool. Because with a lot of these simple systems, you can actually red zone areas. So if a tanker stops in any of those areas, especially rivers or whatever, it sends a message immediately, and you can go and say to that guy, why did you stop there and not stop at the houses and things? And in fact, it's a requirement, I think, in Durban now that if you want to operate a tanker, you have to make available every month the GPS tracking records of every stop for your vehicle. So that in that way, you don't have to weigh things and measure things and all the rest of it. Where did you go? Why did you stop there? and here's a photograph from one of our residents that shows you dump the stuff, that's the end of your business. So that's the practical management side of things. I think also from the point of view of the sensors and things, that's the big win of the future. The GSMA talk that I heard recently about being able now to look at mining data out of sewers and detect illnesses and outbreaks before they happen. So you pee whatever infection you've got into the sewer long before you start showing the signs of the illness. Imagine it from a public health point of view, not that we know that you've got it, but this area's got it, or this area's got a cocaine abuse problem. And we sample our rivers to know who's got access to cocaine. Why don't we sample our sewers? There is just so much in this exciting area. So come back to FSM 6, you'll hear more. Thank you very much.